Good afternoon. My name is Jenny Lesser. I'm the Business Development Manager here at United Training. Welcome to today's webinar titled Securing the Postmodern Attack Surface, presented by Dr. James Stanger. We are using GoToWebinar today for our webinar. We will be recording the session and we'll share a copy of the recording with you. We do encourage participation throughout the webinar, so please use that questions panel in the GoToWebinar dashboard. We're very excited to present this webinar today, and we encourage you to visit unitedtraining.com to find our upcoming CompTIA classes. And I will now hand it over to you.
Well, thanks so much. I want to make sure everybody can hear me. Greetings from Olympia, Washington. Usually this time of year when I'm giving presentations, I usually give it from somewhere in Europe, whether it be Ireland or the United Kingdom, somewhere like that. But greetings from Olympia, Washington. I'm curious where you are calling in from. So let me know where you're calling in from. This is my way of telling you I want to make this as interactive as possible. So as we go forward, folks, feel free to put anything into the chat window. I already see people doing that, so fantastic to have you here. Again, my name is James Stanger. We're talking about securing the postmodern attack surface. What a term, huh? I'm James, the Chief Technology Evangelist at CompTIA. I've done a lot of work over the years in education, but I've done a lot of work implementing cloud technologies for companies, emerging technologies, also a lot of cybersecurity stuff. Worked as a pen tester and a security analyst. Done a lot of work in Linux and open source, as well as threat hunting, web development, web design, stuff like that. So it's really cool working for CompTIA because I'm able to go and talk to people around the world. I'm also able to access some terrific research that our research team is able to put together. That's me standing in front of a tree. And if you'll notice, there's something kind of weird sticking out of that tree. That's a bicycle. That's called the bicycle tree. That's on Vashon Island in Puget Sound. And that's kind of where I don't live in Vashon Island, but I live around the Puget Sound, do a lot of kayaking and diving and things like that, although I haven't gone diving in a while, kind of depressing. Reason I bring this up is that nothing stands still. And if you stand still, strange things happen. When it comes to emerging technologies, folks, we're going to be talking about cool things that have been happening, some of the problems that can be happening, and how we can solve it. For those of you who don't know who CompTIA is, we're a global non-for-profit trade association. We do education. We do certifications, if you've heard of A+, Network Plus, Security Plus, all that. We do a tremendous amount of work and philanthropy around the world. We're a global organization, and we keep our eye on the global IT industry. And they keep an eye on us, too. We're going to be talking about our postmodern technological condition. What a concept. I'm going to throw out terms at you like ambient computing and fourth industrial revolution, but we'll be getting into skills that you need to support today's businesses. Let's boil it down to something that simple, shall we? So for the next, I guess I've got you down here for about 57 minutes. We're going to be talking about what organizations need from cyber workers. We'll talk about cyber threat intelligence as an example of that, about GRC, governance, whatever that means. Well, we'll talk about that. Risk management and compliance, and essential skills that you have, that you need to have. Well, so let's talk a bit about our ambient computing world here. I like to go into interesting places. Who doesn't, right? In my travels, I've been able to find some pretty cool things. That there is a waterfall. And you might think as well, okay, it's a waterfall. I see some sandstone there and some water, but that's a waterfall that's actually going backwards. And the reason why it's going backwards is because normally the wind, the jet stream kind of flows through this area. That's in England, place in England. It's in the Peak District in England. That's called Kinder Downfall. That's a waterfall. But the wind blows so hard the wrong way, it actually blows the water up the waterfall. That was something unusual, right? There's lots of unusual things going on in our ambient computing world. I say unusual. They are all made of the things that are going on in the world of IT and in our world are all composed of very normal things. But once you combine them together, it gets a little unusual. Let me see if I can explain what I'm talking about here. When it comes to ambient computing, or when it comes to today's modern world, we live in a context-aware kind of world. Okay, take a look at some of these pictures here. There's a picture of a light bulb there. Doesn't mean I've got a great idea. It means that we're all, dealing with smart technology. There are light bulbs these days that have IP address capability in them. They have little mini computers inside the light bulb. A lot of us have smart watches, okay? The whole idea is that through the wearable stuff that we have, or the operational technologies that smart cities have, and by operational technology, it's a fancy phrase, it means basically smart devices. And those smart devices could be things such as the electrical power grid. It could include basically technology like a pipeline, right? Or even a tank full of air or water or full of whatever, right? That is IP enabled, that you can control remotely. That's what operational technology is. So IoT usually refers to things like our wearable stuff that we have and all that, our webcams or whatever, our phones even, or even smaller than phones. But operational technology has to do with industrial level things, controlling of robots, controlling of remote, like I said, whether it be tanks or the electrical grid. But the idea is that with ambient computing, it's in the air, that as we walk down the street, we generate information. As the devices that we wear, they capture that and transmit that information. And basically, as human beings, as individuals, we kind of get blocked off or boxed in, as it were. And basically, as we generate data, as we go from environment to environment, as we go from our homes, once lockdown's over, as we go from our homes and go to work, we get processed, right? As we move from environment to environment, that environment anticipates us. So we're basically talking about how the information that we generate moves from as individuals move from one environment to the next, those environments can prepare themselves for us. Now, this all sounds very, future shock and very future. It's not, it's happening right now. I want to mention ambient computing because it means that basically as we generate data, that data goes somewhere. It goes to data lakes or data centers. It goes to certain places, to 4G networks, 5G networks now. It moves from environment to environment and machine to machine. And this information really helps power what people are calling the fourth industrial revolution. Ambient computing means that the data that we generate gets processed and automated, and it gets AI applied to it. This is not in the future, it's happening right now. So the result is basically could be hyper personalization of information as you go to Starbucks in the morning or wherever you go in the morning, to the workout, to the gym. As you go to work, profiles get built up. The reason why this is a big deal is because you're now talking about private information. You're talking about sensitive information. We need cybersecurity workers who can secure that. With the fourth industrial revolution, I'll explain that shortly. The idea is that it's much more information. So with the first revolution was steam and water power and mechanization. I'm talking 18th, 19th century. The second revolution, mass production, assembly lines, talking early 20th century, late 19th, early 20th century, and on into the late 20th even. But the information age, right, starting in the the 40s, 50s, right, mid 20th century and on into our century. But the idea of the fourth industrial revolution, some people will call the second information age, is the idea of cyber physical systems where you have connectivity, constant connectivity. Intelligence gets applied to it, and context, business, data analytics all gets applied to you. Why is this important to cybersecurity? Well, first of all, we're finding in our research that emerging tech is driving growth through not only 2023, but in the near future. So you basically have all these technologies, information of IoT, right? But the cloud, software as a service, platform as a service, robotics, drones, AI, they are all driving business growth. And this is a global survey that we did. So it's not just relevant to the US, it's relevant worldwide. These are revenue drivers, but they're also drivers of ambient computing or the fourth industrial revolution, okay? So some thoughts real quick about emerging tech. Emerging tech, folks, usually it's like, well, in the next 3 to 5 years, X, Y, Z will happen. That's fine. there's an innovation cycle that Gartner has been talking about for years. And it basically talks about how there's some sort of triggering event. There's a quick boost of enthusiasm. Hey, it's going to change the world. It's going to cure the common cold or whatever. So then it becomes completely inflated. Like, it's like, okay, it's everything. It's going to do everything. And then there's a correction. And then people become disillusioned, like, oh, that's also yesterday, or it really doesn't do what it thought it did. This is so common in everything. I've seen this happen with Linux, for example. I've seen this happen with blockchain. I've seen this happen with Internet of Things, all sorts of things. AI has constantly gone through this cycle where basically it went through this thing and then kind of wintered for a while and then came back around and around and around. AI has been with us for decades. So it goes through some slope of enlightenment, meaning that people start realizing, oh, well, it may not cure everything or do everything cool, but eventually it has applied purpose. So you could talk about this in terms of cybersecurity things. When I say cybersecurity things, for example, Gartner will put out research saying, well, here's all sorts of new constant, cool new things going on, and some of them are going up into that peak of a crazy expectation. Some are going down into the trough of disillusionment. Some are actually reaching kind of maturity. What I want to do today is talk to you about technologies and things that are being used. There's always the innovators, there's the early adopters. I saw the cloud go through this, for example, the concept of the cloud. The whole idea is that you really want to get into it, maybe not at the innovator or early adoption cycle as a business, but businesses, they really want to get into the early, kind of the early majority or the late majority users of this. So it's about practical application of services. Now I'm going to use another buzz phrase called attack surface. When it comes to the concept of the attack surface, it means what an individual or a group, what an attacker can approach and take advantage of. Now let me take a look at this, because you can look at the survey information that I've got here in two different ways. So as an IT professional, as a good guy, a person responsible, she's responsible for implementing artificial intelligence or IoT or 5G. These are the things that the IT pro sees as important. Artificial intelligence is important to the IT professional because businesses like to use it. And again, AI is not something that will be here in 3 to 5 years. It's been here for decades, really. It's strange, every time artificial intelligence actually gets implemented, people don't perceive it as AI, because artificial intelligence has to be always something that's in the future, not in the present. Okay, well, trust me, it is in the present. Go up to Amazon or to Azure or Google Cloud, wherever you want to go, and you'll see AI solutions are ready to use, and not ready theoretically either, where you have to hire some Caltech or MIT person to get it going. It's not the case. You can get these things going in a practical way very, very quickly. So we asked IT pros, what are some of the technologies that you're seeing? The 3 technologies that you're seeing that are important. AI went to the top. First time we've seen that. Usually over the years, it's been the Internet of Things. 5G was third. You see serverless computing, the idea of automation, Kubernetes, Docker, things like this. Edge computing, that kind of has to do with 5G. Edge computing is the idea that as IoT devices generate data, instead of it going to a data center or to the web server or whatever, it goes to intermediate devices that are closer to the user. In other words, the user is on the edge, as it were, as he or she walks down the street, and that data is processed much closer to the user and held much closer to the user. I'm not going to go into great detail about these additional technologies, but so you can see this as well. This is what the IT pro is working with day in and day out. I talk to IT pros every day who are like, yeah, we basically look to implement artificial intelligence to get rid of bias, to make sure it's actually working and giving decent review of information, that it's being given good information, that it's being primed properly. All that. I talk to IT workers who are working with 5G. They're adding 5G to 4G towers and things like this. But this is also the attack surface. If businesses are using artificial intelligence more and more, guess what? Hackers are going to go after that. Okay? So they're going to go, well, where's the AI? Well, the AI is in the cloud. Well, they're going to be attacking the cloud. That's what I mean by attack surface. So when it comes to driving cybersecurity, the people that we have surveyed, they're really worried about a couple of things. They're worried about the variety of attacks that are going on. And by variety of attacks, it's like I think we've all heard about ransomware and what ransomware can do. It can lock down computers. It can do doxing. Doxing is always an interesting idea. Instead of it, a notice basically saying, "Hey James, just locked your stuff. Pay $1,000 in Bitcoin to get it unlocked." It's more, "Hey James, I got a hold of all your documents and I'm going to be publishing them publicly unless you pay me the $1,000 bucks." That's a bit different, isn't it? Imagine the stuff that might be on your computer that's very sensitive, whether it be credit card information, information that you've generated in your private activities, things that you've done for your business, intellectual property. People are worried about the variety of attacks, though, because there's so many problems. There are vulnerabilities that are found in the cloud. There are vulnerabilities found in our web browsers, in our IoT devices. There's so many different things coming at today's workers. They don't know where to look for the next hit or the next attack. Privacy concerns is a big deal. Now, the reason why I spent so much time talking about ambient computing and artificial intelligence and the idea of information that you generate, data that you generate gets turned into information, is because there are serious privacy concerns now. More and more, that every device we have, from the pens that we use to the smart technology that cities use to monitor us, etc., privacy becomes a huge deal. Every company, every organization, profit, not-for-profit, government, all has to worry about privacy now. There are more hackers than ever before. The attacks seem to be bigger and bigger because we keep using technology that's kind of at times immature, and we want to use it in a mature way. One of the main drivers that we're also seeing in cybersecurity is that companies more and more are hiring IT and cybersecurity professionals, not just as those geeks that sit in a server room somewhere or down in the basement where they belong or whatever floor. They're being used as part of an entire cybersecurity chain. And I love that term. Our research department discovered this or identified it. In other words, as a cybersecurity worker, you are part of an important chain of information that starts with the board, the CEO, executive management. And so the IT worker and the cybersecurity worker is part of that entire chain. Very important concept. So we're seeing that artificial intelligence is the #1 skill for the first time that is being used and expected more and more. And it's being used for pattern recognition. AI is really good at identifying patterns. It's faster and better than we are. It's not great at independent thought yet. That's our job. But when it comes to reading log files or network traffic as an IT worker, or identifying patterns in traffic generated by visitors. If you work for Amazon, you're doing a lot of work, for example, in identifying patterns of users so that you can sell them more stuff via Amazon, the Prime or whatever. AI helps with threat feeds. It helps recommend solutions. We see this every day. For example, the Amazon A2I, for example, is a human review workflow machine, right? Machine learning that can do these things for you right now. We see blockchain being used every day, not only in terms of validating information, but helping AI make sure it's using validated and good information. AI is something that can be used to protect information, right? Where we're seeing cybersecurity tools use artificial intelligence all the time. It's in the cloud constantly, but we're also seeing it attacked. Because which is better from an attacker's perspective? To bring down an artificial intelligence solution to do a denial of service attack and crash it, there's that. Or is it better to manipulate it so that it starts providing information that's really skewed in your favor? So we're seeing a lot of data manipulation attacks and things like this. And this is important because if AI gets messed with, if all that data that we generate in our ambient computing futures and present gets messed around with, these are pillars of our modern world, folks. Our identity online. We've seen pillars get attacked. People, I think you already know about Equifax being attacked. It's old news, but the Health and Human Services in the US and the UK and various countries attacked. We're talking about credit and identity, our healthcare system, right? Voting attacked. Those are pillars, and if they get messed around with too much, you have problems in society. Okay, so those are the stakes there. So AI and machine learning give us cool things. It automates manual tasks, and that makes it so that instead of hiring workers to, okay, go look at that log file. AI can do that, and it allows the workers, the human workers, to apply their human intelligence in more productive ways. So AI is really good at finding patterns and uh, uh, doing a little bit of correlation, but it really has problems doing strong correlation. Human beings, we're pretty strong at that. We're pretty lousy at finding patterns. So AI is strong in certain areas and weak in certain areas. We're strong in certain areas and weak in certain areas. You put them together and you have some pretty cool stuff. I use Amazon Detective as an example that investigates potential security issues. Still fairly rudimentary in terms of what it can do, but it does take care of a lot of those automatic lower level tasks. I'm showing here a proxy server log file. AI is really good at identifying those patterns. Human beings, we get lost in there pretty quickly, right? So we don't want to spend time looking at raw data. AI can do that. As we get a report from a machine learning app or an AI app, hey man, we're avoiding repetitive work now, and we can look at unique information. Now, this is also the same thing that hackers want, of course. So there are additional developments over and above AI, because it's all about the intelligence of things these days. IoT, in some ways you could argue it stands for the intelligence of things rather than the Internet of Things. So we're automating everything. AI is a part of this, obviously, but we have serverless computing with Docker and Kubernetes, for example. All of these things make it possible to launch things under certain conditions, to respond to situations, and to improve itself and other things. Those things can be improving of machine processes, applications, the actual code themselves, or how the code is configured. And we can communicate with other machines and people as they get improved. So we're seeing that the cloud is very important, because after all, where do we source all of this cool emerging tech that I've been talking about? Well, we get it from the cloud. So obviously that's an attack surface as well. So these are building blocks for our ambient computing world, because the cloud acts as a data store for us. The cloud acts as a platform that we can launch cool applications. So it's a very important thing. It's a ready-made platform. It has available software for us, scalable services, all those things that the cloud promises. Whether it can live up to that or not is up to us as IT workers. So it integrates cloud and install. It can integrate IoT data and services and all sorts of data streams. And it gives us access to data. It can act as a data sink here. That's a place in England called Helvellyn. It's a really cool lake up in a mountain somewhere. And I thought it was kind of fun to see this lake in a cloud, kind of like a data lake in a cloud. Get it? But what's interesting about the cloud, it can also represent something volatile. Okay, this is Mount St. Helens. It blew up, what, 25, 30 years ago. I guess, yeah, 30 something years ago, whatever. It blew up. The idea is that this is something in the clouds. So does the cloud represent something that is an opportunity for us, or is it a liability, right? Because it brings an attack surface. Well, the answer is cybersecurity professionals are there to make sure that we're protecting these kinds of things. And this brings it up, I think, a larger point. IT and security professionals are information curators. These are pictures here that I took of the British Library there, that top one there. That's the British Museum down there below. Think of it this way. All of this data gets generated, and companies are using it, and they're processing it, and and I don't care if these companies are the water utility, the electricity utility, governments, if they're large or small companies. That more and more we're all becoming information companies. Well, possession is 9/10 of the law. Well, who possesses all of that data? Who possesses that data as it gets turned into actionable information? The answer, IT workers. We kind of possess that data. So if possession is 9/10 of the law, we are curators and custodians of intellectual property. And by intellectual property, I'm talking about sensitive information, people's addresses, social security numbers if you live in the US. Are we custodians or curators of data? I was talking to an IT worker where I was talking about, yeah, we're custodians of data. And she was like, no, I think we're more curators. A custodian is something that's kind of seen after the fact and cleaning up. We're actually involved in managing this data. We are knowledge workers as IT professionals. A knowledge worker traditionally was a lawyer or a doctor. Well, IT workers are very much knowledge workers. We are working to create very cool new solutions every day about data, about great ways that we can help sales folks move things forward there, or marketing or research to find cures for various things, or to identify data that can help us, information that can help us move things forward. So how do IT workers then have a place at the table? What are the things that we need to learn? Well, it's kind of a data science thing. Data science isn't just for the Caltech and the Cambridge folks. It's become commodified, right? Cyber workers are data and info workers. As we work as data analysts, as cybersecurity professionals, we're kind of security analysts and analysts. There's that word again, analyst. So people will talk about data science and information management, and or they'll talk about, well, we're doing big data. They used that term years ago. We've been working as cybersecurity professionals in this for years. We gather together cybersecurity threat intelligence. We get security analytics information, whether that be log files from a firewall or from a server or from an IoT device. We basically are responsible for creating actionable information. We generate reports. Sometimes those reports are generated by artificial intelligence. Sometimes that trending information comes from automated services, but we need human beings who can take this and create actionable information, true narratives that are relevant, that actually correlate to reality, but narratives that basically help an organization move forward with confidence. So as we work to create actionable information and accurate narratives, think of yourself as a cybersecurity professional, not just as somebody who uses a SIEM tool, right? SIEM tool, or intrusion detection, or deep cross analytics of sessions. You think of yourself as somebody who is providing confidence to an organization, because your value in an emerging tech world is as a guardian of identity. Okay, sounds kind of fancy, doesn't it? That there is a, I think that's called boxing glove rock. I took that in the Peak District in England. Look, see how it looks kind of like a boxing glove. I thought that was kind of interesting in terms of defending people and security. But so we guard more than just data, or even more than information. Again, data is raw data. Information is, correlation, and we're kind of looking at, okay, I can make a decision based on information. But cybersecurity workers protect modern identity. That's what we do every day. That's the value. So ask yourself, as you become interested in studying for cybersecurity, whatever that is, the beginnings with Security Plus, or analytics with CYSA Plus, or pen testing, whatever you decide to do, ask yourself, how can I help provide modern identities? I'll give you an example. When it comes to emerging tech, we've noticed in our research that there are about 4 different reasons why emerging tech does not get implemented. Well, a business may not know quite what it's doing, right? It doesn't have a business case. Confusion, customers get confused, or it's too risky. Well, we'd love to get into that, James, to use a little more AI and all that, but or IoT or whatever, but it's kind of risky to us. We don't know how to manage that risk, or it costs too much. Usually cost too much is kind of the blanket, that you lay over something to put it out the very discussion. Oh, cost too much, or it's too risky. As an IT professional, it's our job to help make a clear business case. It's our job to show that IT can do some of this stuff. In other words, if there's lack of clarity, an IT worker is the best person to go to for product capabilities of a business intelligence thing or an artificial intelligence tool to find creative solutions. When it comes to risk, it's IT professionals that can act as a liaison to explain, hey, if you do this, here are the issues that you have to manage. Yeah, there's some risk involved, but if you manage it, you can move forward with confidence. You'll be all right. Or if you see it as too expensive, let me give you some accurate information about the risk, some accurate information about the true costs here. That way you as a business leader can say, yeah, there's cost and there's some risk. We manage those things and we can really move the company forward. So there are some issues when it comes to securing emerging technology. Some of those issues involve skipping steps. As IT professionals, you're going to discover that companies have a unique way and a consistent way of generating gaps. That's a picture I took of a place I was hiking in upstate New York. we had to jump over that gap, right? So this can be a problem because as we skip steps, it creates a security gap. Okay, talk about that a little more in a second. Another issue is the concept of shadow IT or bring your own IT. They're related. Shadow IT, bring your own IT is the idea that, well, James, you're allowed to bring your mobile phone in there if you want. That's great. Shadow IT is something a bit different. It's basically where individuals or individual groups in an organization, instead of going through the CIO or through the IT department to create an IT solution, they just grab a Visa card and go up to the cloud and do it themselves. So the IT department isn't even aware that they've gone out and grabbed an instance of Slack for their organization, for their little business unit, or that they've grabbed a CRM, a customer relationship management piece of software. The IT department doesn't know about it. If we don't manage our devices properly, that's another issue. If we don't have proper encryption, no monitoring, or poor authentication. The whole idea is that if we rapidly deploy new technologies and we don't understand them, we're skipping steps and we don't realize it. And so we can also result in situations where organizations receive data that they aren't properly securing. And as an IT professional, obviously our job is to find a way to bridge that gap. That's why I took a picture of this ladder here that helped you go up and figure out that problem, right? That allowed me to hike through that particular gap. You get the idea. The result of not handling issues such as technical debt, or not handling issues such as skipping steps in the development lifecycle, et cetera, is upstream and downstream issues, privacy issues. I've kind of this holy or unholy trifecta here of improperly developed code or improperly sourced code. You go up to the cloud and grab something and you don't really understand it well, that's a problem. Also complexity, if you're connecting multiple systems to each other, that can cause problems. Monocultures, increasingly with the cloud, you can create a solution and then you can repeat it many different times. So you can have hundreds of instances of a vulnerable issue. Back in the day, you'd only have, I shouldn't say vulnerable issue, you have hundreds of instances of a vulnerable piece of computing, whether that be a server or an endpoint, a workstation, or some sort of business solution that you've created in the cloud. Well, you can now repeat that 100 times. So now you have 100 different, 100 of the same vulnerability. Hackers love that stuff. It's a monoculture. It's kind of like, with COVID, we all are naive to physiologically, right? That disease comes in and gets us, right? It's the same way with a monoculture, not only in the cloud, but in any situation, that if we create the same instance of multiple things, all a hacker has to do is introduce a bad element to that one thing and it spreads all the way through those 100 or hundreds of devices. So as a result, we end up with all sorts of issues. We can end up with privacy issues, right? If we're guardians of identity and we've created bad code or complexity that we can't manage, or monocultures that can get infected easily, we can end up out of compliance with things such as the California Privacy Act or GDPR if you do business with Europe, HIPAA with healthcare in the United States. You get the idea. You get ransomware and all sorts of fun things like that. And there's a concept that's important. It's called technical debt. And it's a fancy phrase for simply saying this. If you skip the step or do an improper step in your development of a business solution, and you move too quickly, you incur a technical debt that you're going to have to pay back later. It's kind of like, when you use the Visa card, you don't want to save up for something, you just throw it on the Visa and don't worry about it. There's a debt there that you're going to have to pay back. If you don't pay it back, what happens? Well, you get your home or your auto or whatever repossessed, right? You lose it. In business, when we incur a technical debt, organizations will have disgruntled customers come back to them, or they will have hackers come and attack them. That's what technical debt is all about. This all can result in kind of a toxic IT sort of situation. That's a geyser I visited in Yellowstone, by the way. So shadow IT can result in technical debt, non-compliance, customer dissatisfaction, performance issues, loss of information integrity, and cost overruns, all those types of things. And as IT workers, we need to solve those things. We did a survey where we asked, why is it that there's an increased sales cycle when it comes to emerging technology? And people are saying, well, things are kind of complex. Tech has gotten more complex, and we're worried about security concerns. And all of these kinds of issues are simply restating the idea of technical debt in many ways, or the fact that we're not including IT workers properly at the beginning of the design of a solution. So we need to solve these solutions. So security has kind of come of age over the years, and governance is kind of a big deal. Sounds boring, but it's not. Organizations are looking for confidence, okay? That's what I want you to take away from this particular slide. Consider the 3 hats that cybersecurity workers wear these days. Up until about 2010, a lot of IT departments, and some IT departments that are very, very good, still run as one department. They have infrastructure and cybersecurity all lumped in there. But up until even 2010, that division of infrastructure people versus cybersecurity people was kind of amorphous. Kind of wasn't really carefully thought through. Let me explain. Infrastructure people, their job is to provide services, okay? To make sure that X is working. By X, is that cloud instance working? Is the customer reseller management system working? Is email working? Their job is to make that service up and run. Cybersecurity folks are the ones who kind of look around the corner of a problem and go, okay, I see that you got that email server going really quickly. Were there any steps that were skipped that are going to create risk, too much risk for the organization? Those two ideas were really kind of lumped together, and it caused a lot of confusion. It still does for some organizations. By 2015, people kind of realized, yeah, okay, there's kind of the 2 different approaches: infrastructure people who make sure stuff works, and cybersecurity people who make sure that things work securely. Well, by 2020, there's kind of 3 hats that people need to wear on some level, whether it be a small organization or a large one, to make sure that organizations move forward with confidence. And those hats are making sure the service works, infrastructure, making sure that it's secure, and making sure that it's managed properly. And by managed properly, I'm talking about the idea of cybersecurity and privacy, because we protect people and information. So you've got privacy on the one hand. The idea is, well, James, is your credit card information private? Is your personally identifiable information being held by a company? Are they keeping it private? Well, what does that have to do with security? Well, they're highly related, and they have points of intersection. So you got security on one side, privacy on the other. And the idea is that with laws, our job is to make sure that privacy and security are implemented properly. And let's put it this way: you cannot have privacy unless your cybersecurity ducks are in a row first. So you can't ensure privacy unless you have security workers doing proper monitoring, doing proper authentication, doing proper access control. You get the idea. So you can't ensure that you are following a particular law or obeying a certain law like GDPR, or a law such as the California Consumer Privacy Act and things, unless you have people saying, well, yeah, we have security solutions in place, and I can validate that and verify it. Because as a cybersecurity worker, your job is to look at frameworks and regulation and standards and map those things to what your business is doing. And even more importantly, mapping the security controls, encryption, authentication, all those things to what the business is doing. So you basically are applying risk management concepts, because you are aligning the department or business or organization, what it does, to specific security controls. And there are a lot of these frameworks out there. I'm not going to go into great detail on them. For example, if you are an organization that takes credit card information, you've got to be compliant to something called PCI, industry standard, been around for years. A lot of times, if you're in the work with the U.S. government, you'll be working with the NIST cybersecurity framework. That framework is where you take a look at 5 different concepts to identify, protect, detect hacks, to respond and recover. That's the NIST cybersecurity framework. Other organizations have to follow ISO 27000X or 2701, for example, standards. These things are not just theoretical or, oh, I don't know, that's not important. This is stuff that organizations have to prove compliance to every day. If they don't, they get fines or they get dropped as business partners. They won't be in business anymore, things like that. So what are the skills that we need for all of this? Well, let's talk about it a little bit. I would argue that many of the skills that I'm going to be talking about kind of are formed around the nucleus of kind of what I would call the two sides of the same coin, pen testing, security analytics. You could argue that security is understood in terms of those two different things. Let me see if I can explain it. Pen testers, red teamers, I'll combine those two for right now. Pen testers are people who work on the offense. They basically go in and they generate noise. Okay, they go in and they see how they can hack in to a particular company's attack surface. So if you're a company that does web development, guess what? They're going to be going after web development type things. They're going to be looking for session cookies, authentication issues, how to encrypt, how to mess around with and manipulate encryption, transport layer security, SSL, to basically go in and see how they can manipulate a TLS session and maybe go in and lower that encryption level to where they can hack something. Just an applied example. So that's what pen testers do. They generate the attacks. And they generate things called indicators of compromise. There's a fancy phrase. And the reason why they do this isn't just to say, oh yeah, we did this and here's our report. That's too simplistic, and that's something that's been done over the years. But over the years, we've noticed that we need people listening. We need listeners. That's the other side of the coin. So pen testers, there's the heads, as it were, let's say. The tails side of it are the security analysts. They're the people who listen. And this is a really big deal because the reason why you have a pen tester is to improve your security analysts. Because security analysts do a couple of things. They listen for the noise, for the indicators of compromise, for the stuff that pen testers generate. And then they go, wow, we never noticed that before. There's all this information that we get, or all this data that we get. In all of that, we lose that pen tester, we lose that attacker. We can't find what she's doing or what he's doing. So we need to fine tune how we listen. That's one of the first things. So the pen tester goes in there to improve the ability for the security analyst to listen for things. So there's kind of an interesting yin and yang, two sides of the same coin type of thing going here. Security analysts also will then say, well, look, the reason why we missed that data, that information, is because we didn't have the right security controls in place. We didn't have good monitoring systems in place. We need to fix that. Our logging is a mess. We need to centralize that, and that's what a SIM is. It takes all these thousands of logs from all these different resources and visualizes them very nicely, okay? They work together. And these are very important to emerging technologies because pen testers and security analysts need to understand the attack surface of the organization. If the organization is using the cloud more, then they need to go in and say, well, here's what these attacks look like when it comes to the cloud, for example. So we need business and intelligence analysts, yeah, but we need security analysts. This here is a picture of something called the Cobbler, or I think it's Ben Arthur, something like that, in Scotland. I climbed to the top of that there. To me, it looks like kind of like a hacker, doesn't it, with the hood, right, hunching over something, or it could look like a security analyst looking at a computing situation. I think it's kind of cool. Anyway, we need security analysts because we basically need to move from just mere detection to kind of prevention or proactive knowledge. I really shouldn't use the word prevention. I should use the word proactive knowledge of attacks. So we can model threats, and we can take a look at threat information as it comes in from government resources or information sharing and analysis organizations. They're called ISAOs. As you get information from various resources, how can you take that information and run with it? So we need people who can listen carefully. We need people who can identify what hackers are doing. I think many of us on this webinar might understand various security models that are out there. There's the Lockheed Martin cybersecurity kill chain. There, you're looking at it right now. Great model, right? There's the MITRE attack model. This is another one. Some people will try to compare the two, and one's better than the other. I see that you can use them together. But these are models that basically, let me go back to the Lockheed Martin one. that basically describe the process that an attacker will take. First, they'll surveil you. They'll watch and look at the situation and see where they can attack. Then they figure out, okay, I see a vulnerability. I'm going to take a piece of code and turn it into a weapon. I'm going to find a way to deliver it. I'm going to conduct the exploit, get all that going. I'll install it. I'll issue command and control, and then I'll take actions on objectives. Other people will say, well, another way to look at it is there's the initial recon, and then they do an initial compromise. They establish a foothold. You escalate privileges, or you move laterally. You conduct more reconnaissance internally to see where you are. Each of these elements represents kind of a pivot point. That's a fancy term for saying, okay, I'm in a certain situation. What do I do next? Given the data that I have, how can I do something and move on to do the most damage, or to get access to what I want, or to reach my goal? And then complete mission. There are all these different models. There's two of them there. A third one is what's called the diamond model, and it's the idea where you can weigh the capabilities of the adversary versus the infrastructure of the victim, and how you can basically come about to understanding how attackers are working. All kind of theoretical stuff, but this is all things that cybersecurity workers need to be thinking about, because it's all about trying to profile and understand what the hacker's doing. What tactics are they taking? What techniques are they using? What specific procedures? Because if you can identify those, then artificial intelligence can come in and repeatedly block those things, so that if it becomes something, okay, we know about that, we've identified the tactics, the procedures, the tools that are used. Well, now you can have AI and automation come in and handle that automatically. And then you, as the threat hunter, or you as the security analyst, can go and look for the unique problems. There's all that automated stuff going on, and the script kiddies and the less talented, or even the more, how should I say it, identified problems, that can be automated. And now the security worker can devote more hours of her time to the unique problems. So we need workers who can understand not just the tools that hackers use, but how it's used, and how a group of individuals use it, and actual steps and methodologies, because now you're getting into unique information that will help you. We also need cyber threat intelligence people who can share information and also analyze information. What you're looking at here is a screenshot of something called Alien Vault OTX. It's a threat exchange kind of tool. It's free. You can go and analyze it. At CompTIA, we have the CompTIA iSound now. It's very similar. The idea is that basically we have, whether it be Alien Vault or all these organizations, these information sharing and analytics organizations, they're very good at collecting data from around the world about really important hacks for a particular sector, managed service providers or the automotive sector, or even more general. But the idea is to get more focus on intelligence and to get information. And as they get information, we need workers that can take this information and come up with a proper narrative. And they can turn around and talk about Linux, not talk about Linux proxy, but read about, okay, there seems to be an attack on Linux systems. And you need a good person who can turn around and go, we're using those in our company. And then they need to turn around and say, I need to explain all this tech geek stuff to my executive management in IT, or even to the CEO or to the board, not in geek speak, but in business speak. We need workers who can do that kind of translation. So it's a translation between cultures, not necessarily cultures of different countries or races or whatever. I'm talking about business cultures. We need those kinds of workers. We also need workers who can understand the big picture. And by the big picture, I'm talking about they can visualize attacks. There are so many ways that you can capture data as a security professional. I think most of us on this particular little visit we're having have used Wireshark before. It's a packet capturing tool, or an intrusion detection system tool such as Snort, or something called Zeek, used to be called Bro. These are ways to capture information, and they're very effective. But the whole idea of a cybersecurity worker is, yes, we need people who can grab those packets off the line, or they can take log information, and slice it and dice it, okay, and come up with the right information. Because one of the big problems of cybersecurity is they use the phrase the fog of more. Fancy phrase, it's a funny phrase, because we get too much information. There's too much information and it kind of clouds up our picture. It kind of introduces fog rather than clarity. Let me explain. Back in the old days and even now, whenever there's a battle, a real battle that takes place, there was always this strange fog that will arise from the fighting. Back in the day when it was people running around on horses, they would kick up the dirt and dust. And so generals couldn't see what was going on. So they couldn't give command and control decisions. It was called the fog of war. It still happens with, you know, tanks and bombs and et cetera. You get the idea. Well, the fog of war is as you're going to battle against the hackers, you capture information, but you get so, or capture data, but you get so much, you get lost. You just can't find anything. It's your job as cybersecurity professionals to slice and dice that information and to represent it accurately and to put it on a screen for people to see. And by a screen, it's not just where you would show, okay, look, here's our security monitoring tool CEO. Look at that, there's the attacks. Well, a CEO is going to look at that and she's going to go, or he's going to go, I don't understand the relevance of what you're talking about. So it's our job as cybersecurity professionals to show trends and say, the reason why I'm showing you this little bit of data here is, and then you put it in the terms of business, is saying what we have is I would argue, an improper amount of risk in our Linux systems that we need to address. And it'll cost about $50,000 to handle that, but that will make it so that you can move forward in confidence. Now the CEO, she can go, okay, I see the risk. I see what we can do to fix it. You know, then they're going to weigh whether or not it's a good idea to move forward or not to fund that, but to show the big picture. So visualization is not just, oh yeah, I see something really cool and it's, you know, all sorts of things are moving and great stuff. Isn't that neat? That's not the point. To visualize something is to basically visualize it inside of somebody's mind so that somebody, that executive, can take proper action. So visualization is really cool. I got something called the Elastic Stack going on my home network where I can visualize certain attacks that seem to be happening or whatever. That's part of it. But the real thing is at a professional level, your job is to basically identify not just visualization like this, but to identify attacks, threats, and vulnerabilities, to understand the architectures that are being attacked, but also the architectures and design that help security solutions, security workers move forward, how to implement security around governance, things like that, around the tools that are being used today, to actually be able to respond to an incident, to really know how to go about doing that. So for Cybersecurity Month, it's in the States anyway, it's Cybersecurity Month. Thought I'd just talk about some of the Security Plus 501 and 601 domains a little bit. These are the domains for the new 601 certification, very similar to the 501. The reason I thought I'd bring them up is that, notice, artificial intelligence is something that's being talked about more and more. It's working into the industry. It's worked its way into the CompTIA exam. Indicator sharing and all that. Well, remember I was talking about indicators of compromise and TTPs, right? Techniques, procedures, things like that, and threat intelligence resources. All of those things are needed. You need to understand those at a professional level. Attack frameworks, the MITRE ATT&CK model, the Diamond model. I went very quickly over those things, but those are just ideas of what we need to do as cybersecurity workers to secure today's attack surfaces. So as we move into the cloud to support ambient computing or to support customer reseller management software or whatever that is, to support the fourth industrial revolution, or look, we're just trying to make sure that we're confident, James, that our web server can take credit cards. Whatever it is, we need people who can understand what it means to work in a security operations center. That's what a SOC is. That SOC can be something that looks real fancy with all sorts of screens, like the old War Games movie or whatever, current movie you could possibly think of or show, or a security operations center that's now hyper distributed because people can't go into that center, right? They're working at home, right? They're in their sweats, but they're still applying cybersecurity in a very interesting way and a very useful way to enable a company to be confident in what it's doing. So when it comes to today's Security Operations Center worker, right, they are integrating with cyber threat intelligence feeds, for example, the CompTIA ISAL or Alien Vault OTX or whatever. They're working with artificial intelligence and machine learning information that comes from the cloud, let's say, from intrusion detection systems. They're protecting data stores and servers. They're working with edge devices, whether it be routers and switches or 5G networks. They're doing all of these things, and they're liaising with workers now who are also working at home more and more. They're liaising with management to make sure that they can move forward quickly. If you want to learn more, folks, about the state of cybersecurity in 2020, we have a really cool report that talks about how cybersecurity workers are specializing in some of the things I've been talking about. Cybersecurity threat intelligence, for example, red team, blue team, all that. How cyber roles have become more formal, about how remote work is a big deal now. It has been for some time, but obviously over the last 6 months, it's become even bigger, and that'll continue to be so. And how cybersecurity workers more and more are being asked to address business needs. There's the URL, and you'll be getting a copy of this slide deck so you can take a look at it later. Also, network with each other. I think it's important to network. You can join my LinkedIn network if you want. Don't have to if you don't want to. Just type in James Stanger, CompTIA. You should be able to find me. But network with other people. Network, because it's very important as you start to learn about these things in a hands-on way. Whether you're studying for a CompTIA certs or for whatever training program, get hands-on with it. Work with people to get virtualization going, to download VMs from the internet that are vulnerable, and you can learn how that works. And you can think in terms of red and blue team. You can think in terms of, well, how would I enable a governance or compliance to this? Things like that. And peers can also recommend each other for employment, things like that. So it's an idea. I've kind of talked us through to the end of time, but I did want to bring up a couple of things that questions people have in regards to cybersecurity. One of those questions involves what does, as a cybersecurity, beginning cybersecurity worker, what can I do to get started? How can I, what are some of the first steps to think about? I'll give a quick answer to that. One of the things that you can do if you really want to understand that what a cybersecurity worker needs to do is take a look at the objectives for a particular certification. I'll use CompTIA certification because I work for CompTIA because it represents what the industry wants. At CompTIA, we listen to thousands of IT workers. When we ask them, what does it mean to be a pen tester? Or what does it mean to be a security analyst? We don't just get opinions from 10 or 15 people. We get it from thousands of people. We have an amazing process. And that process results in these objectives. And they kind of act as a little subject matter expert for you, right? So if you can't reach out, you feel shy or just don't know how to reach out to folks who are subject matter experts in a particular field, start with those objectives. That will help you understand, get the fingerprints of where to start. You can take a look at the Security Plus objectives, for example, and start studying. And then you can start, I would download, I use VirtualBox. And I download Linux, and I grab the licensed version of Windows that I have, and then I practice using certain things, certain tools against those tools. That helps me understand things in a hands-on way. Another thing, there's another person who was asking, I need a lot of, I need to get experience. How do I get that initial experience? If I've already studied, let's say, the beginnings, the basics of, or the essentials, I should say, of security. Do volunteer work. There's a lot of opportunities that you can do. It might be free, but that applies to experience. And when you go to a hiring manager, you can show your certification, but you can show that you have actually implemented this stuff for a particular club, a particular user group. I don't care if it's a church, I don't care if it's a neighborhood association. Everybody needs helpers. That is real experience. It doesn't have to be a waged W-2 or 1090 kind of thing to apply to a resume. So there's a couple of questions that I had. I've taken us up to the time here, so I don't want to go too far over. If you have any additional questions, feel free to contact me at jstanger@comptia.org. I'm happy to answer any questions that you have. So until later, thank you so much, and I'll turn the time back over to conclude the webinar.
Thank you so much. That was great with a lot of great information, and we loved your photos too. So
Thanks.
everyone have a great rest of the day.
Take care, man.